Thank you, and welcome to the webinar where today we'll be answering the questions on the whys and hows in green screen modernization. This webinar has been developed by Proximity, your premier partners for IBM solutions, support and development. And as our name suggests, we achieve this through working closely with our customers. We're very much in your corner. Now, before we start, it may be nice to know who today's team is, and I'll stop sharing my screen so you can perhaps see better photos than that, maybe. There we go. First, my name is Andrew Nicholson, and I enjoyed 25 years in enterprise solutions, including 10 plus years, has it really been that long, within the IBM community. I help by advising and supporting customers to continue and grow their business applications and help them become more modern, productive, and profitable. Now, on my right, not sure where he is on your screen, but with 20 years experience within the IT field, Greg Patterson is an esteemed consultant at Fresche Solutions. His recognition as an expert in modernization has seen his work being published within many industry journals, including the IT Jungle. Say hello, Greg.
Yep. Hello, everybody.
Excellent. Right, I'm going to put my screen back on now. Thinking about it, maybe that screen was better. I'll put my video feed off to help with the bandwidth. So, within the webinar, you'll notice that on the left-hand side of the screen is the toolbar. Here you can raise your hand or ask questions. We'll keep a review of these during the webinar and answer any asked questions during the Q&A session before the end of the webinar. Now, for those who didn't join us for last month's webinar, this video is available now on our website. To recap, in this 50-minute session, we introduced WebSmart, a rapid development tool for creating desktop and mobile web applications. And this is a must for the RPGers out there that want to develop responsive web applications. Please do go check it out. Finally, before we start, obviously I'm broadcasting from home, so if you hear my dog barking in the background or the occasional shrill voice, don't worry, this is perfectly normal. With this in mind, pull up a chair, grab a hot cup of coffee as we're about to begin. So first, I'd like to take you through the top concerns of businesses on the IBM and explain why now more than ever you should be looking at introducing web interfaces to your green screen applications. Well, as per the last webinar, we'll start with the top concerns of the IBM Enterprise, and in particular, the top three that have remained consistent for almost a decade. Now, while cybersecurity and disaster recovery high availability have dipped in concern over the past couple of years, the only item in the top three of concerns that is actually rising is modernizing applications. Well, why is this? Well, there are perhaps a few reasons why, but let's start with perhaps the most important today. We're now in a post-COVID economy, and as such, the modern IBM enterprise faces challenges. Challenges in balancing the management of on-premise systems with a remote workforce, which, if unresolved, is incompatible with modern working and may not only challenge employee satisfaction, but lead to staff not being able to satisfactorily complete their jobs. Meaningful and easy, but by no means unsecure access to data on a plethora of devices is now not just a nice to have, but becoming a requirement. And this new flexible working should be easier to adopt, not only for existing stakeholders, but for onboarding new staff too, especially if they're looking to hire new employees who are under the age of 30. I'm pretty sure only a few millennials have ever seen a green screen, let alone used one. The scrolling, tabbing, and key entry necessary to use these older solutions is completely unfamiliar to the TikTok generation, and you can save yourself a significant amount of training time and costs by implementing a user interface that's more familiar and intuitive. An easier to use interface also improves application adoption and acceptance across all your employees. Now, a time-old driver for modernization is within productivity, as GUIs can reduce keystrokes for the many screens that you need to navigate. Furthermore, you can incorporate elements such as radio buttons, tick boxes, and auto-completes to reduce errors and the time it takes to look up and enter data. And with each small gain, this can soon add up to significant time savings. Modernization also future-proofs existing applications by leveraging proven technology that meets current business needs while providing the agility to take advantage of future technologies. This, in turn, leads to a foundation in which an enterprise can build upon existing technologies to extend functionalities with date pickers, drop down boxes, images, charts, and more, plus added accessibility with dynamic desktop to mobile GUIs through responsive web design. And more on this soon. Okay, well, today we're delighted to introduce you to Presto from Fresche Solutions, your answer to today and future modernization questions. The fastest way to give your IBM green screens a modern web GUI that's accessible from any device. So, how does it work and what does it do? Well, starting with the former, Presto on the fly will web enable all RPG and COBOL applications and menus. It does this through using the 5250 data stream, APIs, or open access. Therefore, no code changes are required. It also provides a potential through its integrated visual editor to customize screens with images, drop-down menus, date pickers, and more. Presto also includes responsive mobile features, so you can access your screens from desktop or mobile devices. It'll automatically hide elements on smaller screens, such as function menus to collapsible menus, hide the header row, stack subfiles, and more. So this all sounds pretty good so far. But how can Presto help you? Well, first, the results are immediate. Out of the box, your existing green screens are instantly accessible as modern web pages. And these modern web GUIs keep your IBMI relevant in the eyes of end users and management by giving your existing green screens new RPG programs a fresh graphical interface. But it's not just with the user interfaces that we can modernize, as Presto can provide a more seamless experience by using APIs and web services to integrate with additional web applications and data sources. And remembering the post-COVID drivers for flexible working, with Presto, users will only need a browser to access critical web enterprise applications. No less secure, but easy to deploy, manage, and access. So Presto is quite the powerful package and makes it easy for IBMI programmers without HTML experience to add new functionality that increases productivity. But what should you expect out of a box, and how can you enhance GUIs? Well, take a look at a couple of examples, starting with subfiles in this example for a web page. Presto here automatically detects the function keys and moves them to a side menu, identifies primary function keys and leaves them as buttons, detects subfile options and puts them in a hover menu, styles the table like a standard web list. But what if a subfile was rendered for mobile use? Well, here, Presto's responsive features automatically stack subfile rows when accessed from a mobile device. From here, we can evolve the experience through the visual editor. Within the visual editor, we can do things such as break up screens into tabs for easier reading and intuitive navigation. Now, the visual editor moves you past the out-of-the-box experience and enables you to customize screens. The great thing about the visual editor is that it's WYSIWYG. So what you see is what you get. It's a view on what you're producing, and no HTML knowledge is required. Here you can edit properties of any element, such as making a drop-down list, source a hard code list, or a DB2 file using SQL. And let's not forget web services too, as we can add facilities such as online payments through using Presto, and perhaps now would be a good time to pass the demonstration and show you some of these features in real time. So I'll pass you over to Greg, who'll provide you with today's Presto demonstration. Greg, I'm going to pass over controls to you. This is very inelegant, I know, for the people watching, but I'm going to make him the presenter. And now you can take control.
Okay, I will just share my screen here. And they should be able to see the Presto web page just at this point.
See that. All yours.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Andy. So what I'm going to do to show you Presto today is I'm actually going to run through it quickly in the browser as an end user would see it. And at the end, I will also jump into the development tool that Andy showed some screenshots of, so that you can get a good sense of how we can accomplish some of the things that Presto does for your green screens. So just to reiterate, I know Andy hit it a few times, but all your end users need is a browser to be able to access Presto. They need obviously the address, but any browser, any device, and they're able to access the system. They don't need anything installed locally. So what I'm going to show first is what we call Presto right out of the box. It's really what you get simply from installing Presto and some of the basic transformation from green screen to the web. And then I'll show you a customized version as well, just to show you some of the enhancements we can do. So if I just go ahead and log in here, even on the first screen we look at here, it's the IBM main menu. Presto does a bunch of things automatically for us. First of all, it recognizes structures like menus and makes them clickable with the mouse. These are all hyperlinks. They could also be transformed automatically into buttons, but ultimately it allows somebody using a mouse to be able to navigate the system. But I can still use the quote unquote standard green screen processes by simply taking the option and pressing enter. Very similar with the function keys. Presto identifies your function keys. In this particular scheme, we keep any navigation-related function keys at the bottom. Those are usually exit, cancel, and submit is just like pressing enter on the keyboard. And any screen-specific function keys we have over here on the left. And in my case, I'm not showing the F3 equals notation on the buttons, but if I hover on them, it does show me a tooltip with the function key. And again, Presto has keystroke recognition, so it supports the function keys, and people can use them exactly the same way as they do on the green screen. And on that note, because Presto is not code invasive, meaning we're not ever going to be getting into your RPG code, you're able to have people still use the green screen concurrently with Presto, and there are no conflicts there. Now, if I just call a quick program here, I can type, there we go. It's a very simple menu. There's only two options as part of our tutorials. I'm just going to pull up a subfile here and maybe just go into the edit of a particular record. Now, this is a very sort of straightforward data entry screen. The only thing here is that we do have an F4 prompt, which brings up a window just like it would on the green screen. Now, there are certainly a lot of things that could be done to this screen to improve it for the web. Just even little things like having all the fields be the same size. We can rearrange things or add some of those features that Andy introduced in the first section. But ultimately, all of the security, application access, functionality, everything is identical to as if you signed in on the green screen. So your users have all the same permissions they had before. They're simply accessing it through the browser. I'm going to jump over to another browser tab. It is connected to the exact same IBMI. It's a separate Presto instance. And a Presto instance really is three things on the IBMI. It's the web server, which we use Apache, which is a part of the IBM I operating system these days. There's a library and there's an IFS location. And so in this case, I have a separate instance of Presto where I've gone through and done some customization. So for instance, even on the sign-on screen here, I've hidden some fields that we don't typically use. And obviously I've rearranged things on the screen as well. I still have some of the system information here and the device name, but it's just a little bit minimized to sort of tidy this up and make it look a lot more like a true web logon screen. In fact, this is basically the structure of the Salesforce logon that I took just to be able to sort of mimic that within Presto. And beyond just the visual, we can also add a lot of value to those existing green screens. Now, might be a very simple example, but even on the sign-on screen here, if we happen to log in too many times incorrectly and lock ourselves out of a profile, which I actually almost did this morning, getting ready for the webinar this morning, I have to go to my internal IT portal to get my profile re-enabled. And so if I happen to lock myself out, rather than having to go and dig for a shortcut or anything else, right here, I added a forgot your password link, which lets me go and reset my password with my internal application. So even little things like that can improve the application and improve the experience for the end users. Now, if I log in here, if you remember before, I had a two option menu. This is the same menu. However, I've enhanced it somewhat. Obviously, I've made certain things. I've made the options into buttons, and the top two here actually correspond with those the two options on the actual menu. But because we're now in the browser, we're able to link out to other web applications. So for instance, a lot of our customers are doing multiple angles of modernization. So if you were at the WebSmart webinar that Andy referenced earlier, I can also link to other web programs. I can click through and it's simply going to launch that application, and looks like it's down. But I'm able to launch the applications directly here. Could be could be a web application, could be a hyperlink to another application or a customer website, whatever it might be. We're in the browser. We can take advantage of some of that by opening up a new tab, or we can also expose other programs on the IBM that may not be on this particular menu. But Presto has some macro capabilities that allow us to record keystrokes and set up more complex processes so that the end user doesn't have to go through to be able to launch those. So we can really flesh out the menuing and make it a lot easier to use. And as you can see, we can style those buttons or hyperlinks however we like. So, even in a touchscreen scenario, these would be very easy to be able to access by just simply by tapping on the screen on, say, a tablet, for instance. Now, if I just jump in, again, Presto manages our subfiles very well out of the box. I'm just going to search for one particular record here. And again, assuming that your screens are relatively standards compliant, Presto will discover subfile options, put them in the hover menu, so that we're able to access things maybe a little bit quicker using the mouse. Again, really depends on the person. However, we can really customize the layout of the screen. Now, just to show the difference, this is the exact same screen as this. It is a different inventory item number, but beyond that, it is the exact same screen, but obviously with several customizations applied. So first of all, we are in a browser. We can do things like display images. We happen to have an image name in the data on the screen. So while this screen is loading, I can tell Presto to read this part of the green screen, grab that name, and attach that to a path that points to where the images are. In my case, that's the IFS. It could be anywhere on the network. It could be on a website. but I'm able to actually draw that image dynamically as I load the screen, and obviously add a bit more visual flair than is possible on a green screen. It doesn't necessarily have to be images though. I also use the model number here. So that if somebody wants to know more about this guitar, they can click on the PDF here icon. It's going to pop open a PDF with all the actual specifications for that particular guitar. So again, this is not functionality that's on the green screen itself, but with a simple tie-in, the end user, instead of having to go and dig for that picture or the PDF, it's accessible just from a click right on the page here. And it's certainly not limited to things necessarily static items either. Very often, we can also, have Presto read the item code, pass that to an SQL query maybe, and retrieve the last 10 invoices. And as we are in the browser, we have much more screen real estate. We could be listing those out here. Again, just to not change the screen, but to flesh out the information that is available there. Presto does have a built-in SQL tool that lets me take an F4 prompt like we had on the original screen, and rather than having a pop-up window with a subfile, I can have Presto read a DB2 file directly and dynamically grab the, in this case, the inventory categories that are available. So just to save a little bit of time in data entry, rather than having to hit F4, scrolling through a subfile, taking an option X on the subfile option I want and hitting enter, I can simply come in here. I can click on it to drop it down, or I can even just start typing and it's going to position me appropriately. Now, sometimes we have larger data sets than my inventory category here, where a drop-down box may not be practical. We can also use an autocomplete type functionality. So this category group, it's really a subcategory of the inventories. I'm able to go through, and as I start typing, it's going to suggest the matching items. Other changes that were made on this screen, obviously I've rearranged the fields as well to fit a little bit differently. And I also, again, have used the SQL tool to be able to visually present some data on the screen here. The overall category sales, the yearly sales for this item, and the top customers for this particular item. We're really able to see that all and get some additional information that, again, it's not on the initial green screen. And in this case, this is all reading DB2 data. But as we introduced earlier, you can also do things like call web services, call other applications to be able to retrieve data dynamically. A really good example is if you have a tracking number in your data, you could reach out to FedEx or UPS, pass that tracking number, and rather than just showing the tracking number on the screen, we could actually retrieve the status from a web service call to be able to make the screens a little bit more dynamic. And last that I'm going to show you here is there is also a spool file viewer built into Presto. You can, of course, access things like work spool file as well, but this spool file listing lets you come in. It shows for the current user, so in this case me, it's going to show all the spool files that I have available. I can actually filter the list, so if I start typing in the filter, it's going to position me in the list here. And if I select a row, I can then view it either as HTML directly in the browser, or I can pop open a PDF in the browser. Presto will convert that spool file into PDF and pop it open in a new browser tab here for me. So I now have a spool file that I could, I could save, I could print to a local printer, I could email it, whatever I need to do with it. And the great thing is about this tool, when we're finished with it and we close, we're still in the same spot. We don't have to navigate away from where we are with the within the application. So at any point we can access the spool files if that's a part of your workflow. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just jump over to the development tool. So just to further hammer home the point, again, your end users just need a browser. The tool that I am showing now is a Windows-based tool for Presto administrators or people developing using Presto. What it allows us to do is it allows us to connect to a Presto environment and make changes both on a global as well as a individual screen basis. And so the main part of the window here is actually an embedded browser. So just like before, I can sign in and navigate around my green screens. Um, it is a touch slower than in the browser because the tool is loading some supporting information, but I can access everything I could before. But I do also have access to a settings interface, which allows me to make global level changes to things like timeouts. So for instance, I have it set here, if I abandon my browser for whatever reason, and for 2 hours in my case, or 120 minutes, Presto is going to terminate the jobs and clean up any of the jobs that are running that are associated with the session that I'm in right now. We can also play with some global level settings, um, even things like having an error message. Rather than having the error message show up in the message subfile or even in the footer of an emulator, depending on which emulator you use, Presto has an option to have error messages pop up in a dialog box front and center for the user. So people who may not be as familiar with the green screen, they're still able to work with it, and it's just a little bit more intuitive. We can also choose how the function keys are managed. Do we want them on the left-hand side, the right-hand side, or at the bottom where they appear on the green screen? And of course, we can do custom things as well. I don't show the function key number in my instance, but if I wanted to, there is a checkbox here that will restore the F3 equals type notation. Do we want to detect the subfile options? Do we want to create menus as links, or do we want to change that maybe to buttons so that we get a different look and feel? And the other thing that I do want to show here as well is what we call the skin. This is really a visual view. Presto uses standard web technologies. HTML is the content, CSS is the formatting. And so this is a quick way to be able to jump in and make changes to the high level settings. Of course, if you do have a lot of web experience, you can also get directly into the CSS files. This was really designed to make it easier for people that may not have an extensive web skill set to be able to make some changes. So for instance, if I wanted to change the header color here, I can change that easy. I could change all of the buttons and everything else here as well. I might as well make those match. So I can make some of these changes happen very quickly. Obviously, I can also do things like upload a logo. Nobody probably wants our generic company name logo there. So, in this case, I'll just pull in the Fresh logo and put it there just to change the display a little bit. And at this point, once I make these changes, any changes that I'm making within the tool, whether it's to the skin here or to anything else, is instantly reflected. If I jump back to my browser here and go to my out of the box instance, I'm just going to reload it because it has to reload the actual style sheet. You can see those changes I've made are now available to the end users. So typically, we don't recommend making changes to live environments. Obviously, that can get pretty confusing for the end users. But there's also the reason I show that is because it also shows that there's really we can make changes between different Presto environments, but for the end users, there's no deployment. Once we put the changes into their environment, they are live. So typically, we have development environments, test, and production. And obviously, the users are accessing production. So once everything's gone through testing, we may promote something production, and the next time somebody logs in, they're going to see the changes. Now, as you can see, I made a settings change here as well, so that all the button, or all of the menu options rather, have been transformed automatically into buttons instead of the hyperlinks. Again, we might want to do that depending on the scenario, especially if it's touchscreen. We have control over how big the buttons are. We could certainly make them larger so that if somebody was in a touchscreen mode, it would be significantly easier. Now, I'm going to go back to the same screen that we've looked at a couple of times here and show how we can actually make some changes to the screen using Presto's visual tools. So Presto has several different ways we can customize, but by far the most popular, as Andy said, is using a WYSIWYG visual editor that allows me to come in and I can access the screen. It looks the same as the web page, but at this point, I'm actually able to select items on the screen, and I'll just pin that open here. And once I've selected them, I have the option to change any of their properties. So for instance, I'm able to go through and I could change the background color here to black, and I could change the foreground color for my labels to everybody's favorite lime green color. And all of a sudden, we have a little bit of mimicking of the green screen. Now, that's not a recommended change. I just want to show how easy it is to make some of the changes. So I'm just going to reset those changes because I not actually how I'd want to style it. What I would probably do in this type of a case is maybe I would select those labels, and just to differentiate them from the data, I could bold them so that there's just a slightly different look to them. I can also select items, either single items or multiple items on the screen, and I can move them around within the context of the screen. So if I wanted to sort of differentiate some header information from the rest, I can do that. And Presto also has the concept of a palette here, which allows me to be able to drag and drop items onto the screen here as well. So for instance, if I wanted to put a little container maybe around the header information here, just to, again, to differentiate it a bit, you can see there's some guidelines that snap in to make it easier to size things. But ultimately, I could add that to the screen, and then I go back here, and I now have those properties are available, or that item is now available. If I wanted to, put a border around that information, I could select that, have a border that's going to go around the top. The only other thing that I'm going to do here is just make sure that I put that into the back so it doesn't block anything. And at this point, I just have to save it with a unique name. And at this point, I now have, obviously, it's not a significantly changed screen at this point. I've just moved certain things around, but I have the beginning of a different structure for this screen. Now, I can certainly go through and I can manipulate many different things. I could make all the fields the same size. I could stack them beside each other. But in addition to the actual layout type of things I can do, I can also do things like for this F4 prompt for the inventory category. I can also set that up so that I am going to be creating a, I'm just going to, it's having an issue with my editor here. I'm just going to reset that for a minute. But what I can do with that inventory category is I could actually, I'm going to take this button and I'm actually going to hide that button. So there's a visibility option here. I'm just going to hide that because rather than having an F4 prompt in this case, I want to transform this inventory category field into a drop-down box. I can select that by right-clicking on it, I can then choose transform into, say, a drop-down list. It's now changed the control on the screen to a drop-down. And over in the properties, I now have a data source option where I could hard code some values, which of course has limited usefulness, or I can point it at a query that I have in my repository, which I've added all of these, obviously. I have an SQL statement. It's very simple. It's just retrieving my inventory categories. If I apply that, say OK, and now in just a few seconds, and again, I did have the SQL obviously pre-entered, but in just a couple of seconds now, I have a fully database-driven drop-down box rather than that F4 prompt. So the changes that we can make really can be very quick. They can be pretty extensive in terms of what we can do. And we can really go from, and we do have customers that go direct and use Presto simply out of the box, right up to something like this, where we're able to really have a much more fully fleshed out web application versus a really busy green screen. Now, this is probably one of the most complex examples, and sort of there was a lot of work put into this one. There's a lot of promptable fields. All the yellow fields here are promptable. So there's a lot of drop-down boxes over in the modernized version, radio buttons, check boxes for yes, no fields, visual date pickers, spinner controls, and even browser tabs here to break up that information to make it a little bit easier to read. So there certainly is a lot that we can do to the screens. And as Andy said, you don't need a lot of HTML or web experience. It certainly can help, but you don't need it because we have the visual editor that can help you get there a little bit quicker and be able to make those changes. We've got some great tutorials that come with the product and examples as well, so that you can implement some of what you've seen here today pretty easily and get a really different look and feel for your applications. Okay, I've been going for a while here. I am going to turn it back over to Andy for the closing.
Thank you very much, Greg. That's a lovely demo. Can you see my screen again?
Not yet.
Nope.
No.
I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Just give me tell me when.
Yeah, gotcha.
Perfect. Great stuff. So again, thank you, Greg. We saw much in the demonstration on how Presto can help you. First, your existing green screens are instantly accessible as modern web pages without requiring changes to your source code. And it's easy to deploy and access to, with users only needing a browser to access the web-enabled screens internally or remotely from desktops or mobile devices. In addition, you can leverage existing applications to meet current business needs while providing the agility to take advantage of future technologies. We can improve productivity and workflows by enhancing screens with tabs, drop-downs, autocompletes, date pickers, and more, all without coding, and providing a more seamless end-user experience by using APIs and web services to integrate with additional web applications and data sources. All this within Presto, the magic solution, and please forgive the pun, that transforms your green screens into modern, intuitive web pages that will increase user satisfaction, productivity, and enterprise application adoption. Thank you for your time and consideration today. But before we close the session, I believe we have a couple of questions that I'll open up to the panel. That panel being you, Greg. And the first one here, it says, what technical skills are most useful to be successful with Presto?
Well, obviously, it really helps to be to understand the application that you're modernizing and ways that you can make it better. But certainly on the technical skills side, HTML and CSS are not required, but it can certainly enhance what you're doing, understanding some of those web structures. But what we find a lot of the time is that we have very technical green screen developers and managers who may work alongside a web-based team who, although they may not have a clue what RPG is, they can help with the layout of the screens and some of the HTML and CSS to get the development started. So it really is a standard web skill set is really what helps the most.
Okay, terrific. Do you want to put your camera on while we're answering the final
Oh,
3 questions?
sure.
Oh, there we are. No problem. Good to see you, Greg. Now, another question is, everything looks great, but I have very limited resource. Do you have services, partners, etc., to help me get the project underway?
Certainly there are services available anywhere from just getting you started and helping you out right up to full end-to-end development and project work. Really, we're there to help in any way that you need. Like I said, a lot of times what we may do is help you with the initial design and maybe some layouts for some standard types of screens, and then a lot of our customers will take that over and do the rest of the development after a little bit of mentoring and training.
Yeah,
But really, anywhere along that spectrum, we're able to help.
perfect. Another one along the same lines here says, what sort of training options are available? I want to do the most of the work within my own team, but will need help getting going.
There is a fantastic tutorial that is available on our customer site that helps you walk through the basics and really a lot of what I've shown today. But we do also have some instructor-led training options and some video training options that are available. And of course, like I mentioned in the last question, it is also possible to be able to have some of our consultants or our services team be able to help you out to get started and then do some of that mentoring too. So it can really be tailored to what you need.
Terrific. Another one here, it says, it's slightly different. Is it similar speed of screen navigation to the standard 5250 Telnet screens on a LAN? For example, do the screens respond as quickly?
Typically, yes, they do. There are certainly things as a developer you can do to slow that down. But Presto itself is simply taking what is presented from the data stream and applying any of the transformations that we add. So typically, it is very comparable to the green screens. But if you add a large number of customizations, use SQL, for instance, and loading some larger data sets, it might be slightly slower than the green screen, but in most practical cases, there's really very little difference. Assuming a good connection, there's very little difference between the Presto modernized system and the green screen.
Okay, great stuff. And finally, unless anyone else asks a question, are Presto and WebSmart mutually exclusive, or can they work together to accomplish a modernization goal?
Well, certainly, even as I tried to show in the menu today, we can launch one app, Presto from WebSmart or WebSmart from Presto. They are both web applications, and they go about the modernization in a different way, but they certainly can work together. And we have a lot of customers who may start out with the initial Presto view of their existing green screens, and if they're going through a modernization process and creating new web applications, slowly we can replace some of the green screen functionality with the web applications. But certainly there's a lot of interoperability, being able to call one direction or the other to be able to make it a pretty seamless environment. And because all of the viewing or the view of the information is managed using HTML and CSS, the look and the feel between Presto and WebSmart can be as close as you'd like it to be. So it can be a pretty seamless thing for the end user.
Splendid. Thank you, Greg. We can switch our cameras off again now while I finish off when I finish off the webinar. So thank you again for your time today. Before I sign off, there's a really interesting webinar happening next month if you're into DevOps. We'll be looking at application discovery, documentation, and understanding through X analysis, the data lifecycle product that will allow you to model, maintain, and document applications. So I do hope you're able to join us for that on the 22nd of June. I'll wait till you pick up your pencil and mark it in your calendar. And a final reminder to check out the previous webinar on rapidly developing web applications from your IBM I using WebSmart. This video is available now on our website in the video section, so just navigate to videos when you jump on our website. We would encourage you to get in contact should you have any further questions or require additional information. But for now, I'll put my camera on to say goodbye. On behalf of Greg and I, we'll wish you a very good day, and we hope to see you at the next one. Thank you very much, and goodbye. Bye-bye.